listening to a Hope 1032 podcast.
I'm Colette Smart, and I'm a psychologist, a teacher, and your host on Raising Teens. I'm also a parent, and I'm in the middle of raising my own teens and young adult children. I know that raising teens can be fun and busy, but also terrifying and even lonely. I've experienced all of these emotions, sometimes in the same day. On this podcast, I'm joined by well-known experts, and we chat about some of the most common questions I get asked about raising teenagers in my own work, and even some questions I have myself. I have such hope for this generation of young people, so each episode is full of support and practical advice. I love seeing all your questions come in, so each season I focus on some that teachers, parents, and carers have raised. We're all caring for the teens we love so much, so please keep sending in your ideas and questions through my Instagram and Facebook page or via the Hope 1032 podcast webpage, so we can support this generation of teens together. Hello and welcome to this week's mini episode where, as promised, I said I would be chatting about self-talk. So last week we heard from Dr. Vasilakis on the topic of self-compassion, and I wanted to expand on self-talk a bit in this episode because I think the way we talk to ourselves in our heads definitely shapes how compassionate we are or how self-compassionate we are or not. So I thought I would go through positive and negative self-talk, what that is, and then towards the end of this episode, I'm going to give a few practical tips for reshaping or reframing some of what we say to ourselves, and also, of course, to help our teens to be kind to themselves. I suppose the word self-talk is quite self-explanatory, but by way of a brief definition, it's something we do naturally throughout the day. It's kind of like this constant chatter inside our heads. It's a combination of conscious thoughts and our unconscious beliefs and our biases, but it gives our brain a way to interpret and process our daily experiences. But because our self-talk can be destructive or beneficial, it's recognized as a very powerful tool in terms of the impact that it has on our emotions, how we feel about ourselves, what we do, how we respond to events in our lives, and even how we manage pain. Interestingly, it also affects our cardiovascular health and even our levels of stress and anxiety. So I'd love you to take a minute now and think about what you've said to yourself today. It could be when you woke up or even half an hour ago. It could have been something you did or something you wish you'd said in a relationship or something you were part of or something you were about to do. Was the voice in your head critical or was it kind and helpful? How did you feel after this inner dialogue? This inner voice usually starts from the time you wake up all the way until you go to bed, and it can be both positive and negative. I think for many of us, and also our teens, negative self-talk can often be the loudest and most constant voice in our heads. I know it's something I struggle with and wrestle with all the time. As adults, if we had difficult relationships with our own parents who were critical or destructive in the way they spoke to us, then this can often form the basis of the negative statements that have just become part of our own inner voice. I often say in my seminars, our voice will become our child's inner voice. Let me say that again because I think it's so important. Our voice will become our child's inner voice. I know I'm constantly checking myself as a mum. Whenever something comes out of my mouth, my children, I try to think about how will what I'm saying affect my child's own self-talk or their inner voice. And believe me, there are plenty of times I've had to say sorry because I don't do this well all the time, and it's something I'm still working on. But I think something else that some parents find difficult, they may have grown up, or you may have grown up in a home with the rule, I'm the adult And adults don't ever have to say sorry to children. So as a parent, I don't have to say sorry to you as a child. I mean, why ever not? Why was this something that was around in our grandparents' time and some of our parents' time? Adults aren't perfect. We mess up all the time. Saying sorry teaches kindness and humility and empathy. We discussed empathy in our last mini episode after Hugh van Cuylenberg's interview on resilience. It's important also when we say sorry to our children to give our children time to be hurt. If they're hurt by you and want to express their hurt, we need to give them time to do that. We do that as adults when we're hurt by someone. And then ask them if you can try again and say it over when they feel ready to hear something more kind from you. So now I'd like to finish off my last few minutes with you by going through some examples of positive and negative self-talk, and then going through 4 tips to stop negative self-talk and improve positive self-talk. So positive self-talk is supportive, it's kind, and the Department of Health in Tasmania reminds me on their website that focusing on positive self-talk isn't about encouraging our teens to ignore opportunities to learn from their mistakes. Instead, it's about approaching stress in a positive, realistic, productive, and resilient way. So it's not that we're always doing toxic positivity, is what it's called, where we're framing our positive self-talk in false ways, or we're always telling our children they're wonderful and amazing, even when they need to face boundaries or consequences. That's not what positive self-talk is about. But positive self-talk can help our teens process experiences, it helps them make decisions, and it even helps them ask questions about what they're thinking or what they're about to do. Negative self-talk, on the other hand, can become repetitive and overwhelming, and it often feels like what we are thinking is actually the truth. It can take some time for us and our teens to recognize our negative thoughts. It's not something that we instantly understand, and especially if our negative self-talk has been around for a long time, then it can take practice. But over time, and the more you practice, the easier it will become to replace unhealthy negative thoughts with more positive ones. So examples of negative self-talk can often sound like, I'm never going to be able to do this, or I'm just no good at this, or nothing's ever going to get better. Rumination is actually also part of negative self-talk. So that happens when our teens replay upsetting, embarrassing, or what they might call cringeworthy thoughts or events over and over again in their heads. But of course, thinking through a problem, we know, can also be helpful. But if they spend a lot of time ruminating on negative events, small issues tend to snowball, and then this can also lead to depression and anxiety. So what are the 4 tips for how we as parents can help our young people to use positive self-talk? So I think before we do the 4 tips, it's important to remember that when we discuss self-talk, like any other tips or conversations we have with our young people, it usually needs to happen during a relaxed time, not when emotions are heightened or your child is feeling down or they are going through a period of negative self-talk. The 4 tips will be: number 1, start by asking your teen to share with you what their self-talk is telling them in a certain situation. So this is helping them be aware of what they say to themselves. I often ask teens in a session with me to tell me out loud or write down some of their negative thoughts that are in their heads, because we know that writing down or saying our thoughts out loud can reduce the impact of those negative thoughts. Number 2, challenging their thoughts. So we do this by helping teens to ask themselves, is this actually true? Often it's not true. And then we might say something like, is there another explanation or a way of looking at the situation? Remember that many things you worry about don't actually happen. And I love Brené Brown, the professor at the University of Houston Graduate College. Her way of referring to negative voices in her head is calling them gremlins. So by giving her negative thoughts a name, she both steps away from them and pokes fun at them at the same time. The third one is watch what you're taking in. And this is for us as adults as well. Being aware of the messages we're taking in and our teens are taking in through the media or on social media, using movies and social media as teachable moments, even in our own lives, talk about what we see and how it makes us think and then feel. The reason why we have these boundaries around technology for our young people is because we know that what they watch and read or listen to can contribute to negative information and can increase their stress. Then I often ask teens to take one of those negative self-talk examples that they shared with me in tip 1 and respond to that sentence that they usually say to themselves in their head that's negative. Respond to what they've said in the same way that they would talk to someone else who was their friend. You will remember Vaya mentioned this in our previous episode on self-compassion. We then encourage them to replace their thoughts with a positive thought. So, for example, if you think, I won't cope with this situation, they might change that thought to, I'm coping okay, given everything else that's going on. The situation is really stressful, but it will pass. And then we help our child to identify their strengths. So how did they overcome something in the past, or what are some of the strengths in their lives, and help them to also focus on those and begin to incorporate this as part of their self-talk. So I think after today's mini episode, the challenge to myself will be to focus on a strength that each of my children possess and then casually work this into my conversations with them this week. I'm also going to think of a strength that I have and work on that in my own self-talk this week. So is there one thing that stood out to you from today's episode that you might do this week in your own life or with your children? I would love to hear if you have something that has resonated with you in this episode. Thanks for joining me today. And in the meantime, keep parenting with your teen's future adults in mind.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.